All right, at this point in our game, we have the basic movement and we have collision with our tile map as well as with our trees here. But there's one last issue that we have, and what we want is when we're standing in front of a tree, we want to be in front of it like this, but when we're standing behind it, we want the tree to be in front of us. And so we're going to talk about how we can address this here, as well as with the cliff. So here where I'm standing behind it, I put my collision here so I can kind of walk behind this ledge here, but it looks like I'm actually standing on it. So we want to kind of put the cliff there in front of the person. So we're going to talk about how we can do that. And so the first thing is there is something in Godot called the z-index, which is kind of sorting things kind of from your z-axis coming out of the screen. And so if I were to come here to my tile map and change the z-index to be a higher value, it's set at 1, and my player here has a z-index of 0, we would see that it would essentially hide the player. It's still moving, but it's placed in front of them. So that is one way to kind of handle putting stuff in front of each other, but we don't want to place the whole tile map there. We want to kind of dynamically do different parts of it. So I could go back to my tile map and reset the z-index to be 0. And I could change the environment, which is where my trees are, to be an index, a z-index of 1, and run that. But what we would see is now the tree would always kind of be in front of me, regardless of the fact that I'm standing in front of it or behind it. So what we want is we want it to change based on where I am in relation to this. And the way that we do that is with something called Y sorting. And so what Y sorting does is it compares the Y position of two things on the screen. And if I am at, in this case, we're talking about the Y index of the tree versus the Y index of the player. So if I am higher up on the screen, that is a lower Y coordinate value. And so what it would do is it would place me behind it, versus if I'm down here, it's sorting it where I am at a higher Y value. So it would put me in front of this. So we're going to take a look at how we can enable Y sorting in this environment. So let me go back and just set all my Z indexes to be 0, and we're going to kind of start this process. And so the first step that we're going to do is we're going to go here to the World Node2D here, and we need to go to the ordering right here under the inspector and change Y sort enabled to be on. And what we're going to have to do is enable this in a few different places. So we need to enable this as the world because this is the root scene, or the root node in this scene. And so then if I go to the tile map here, I'm going to also need to enable it for the entire tile map here, as well as the layers in question. And so let's start here with the environment. So this is, again, where my trees are. And so what I can do is I can say, let's turn on Y sort enabled. And the second I do that, you see that there's a couple errors here. And so it says that the Y sorted layer has the same Z index as a non-Y sorted layer. And because I'm Y sorting this layer, the environment layer, I need to put it on a different Z index than these other ones that are not Y sorted. So that's the first thing. So if I change this to be 1, we will see that that error now goes away. We're now left with one error that says the tile map layer is Y sorted, but Y sort is not enabled on the tile map node itself. So that's when we need to come down here and change this to be enabled, but we're still going to leave this as 0 because what we want is, by default, we want the tile map to be at 0, and our player is going to end up being at 1, as well as the layers that we want to Y sort, so that it'll handle that properly, but always put the rest of the tile map kind of behind at that Z index 0. So we're going to just first work on this environment here. And so right now this is set up properly, but I need to go to my player, or my character body here, 2D. I instantiated it inside of this world, and I need to set it up for that as well. So that would be Y sort enabled, and then change that index to be 1 as well. And now if I run it, hopefully it'll work. So I'm gonna go over here, and if I stand here, so I'm still kind of in front of the tree here. So let's double check a few, or the tree is still in front of me. So let's double check a few things here. So my player is at Z index 1. Actually, that setting didn't take there. I think that might have been the problem. So let me save this. I didn't click out of this window, so it didn't save that new value, but let's go back and see if that fixes it. Okay, so now I'm in front of it, and here I'm behind. And so that works well. And you may occasionally have to change something called the Y sort origin, and I think we're going to run into that issue when we try to do the cliffs. So let's do the cliffs, and we can talk about how we can handle that issue. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to my tile map. I'm going to tick on the Y sort enabled for my cliffs, and again we need to set that to be 1. And I'll click out of it this time so that it takes both those settings, save it, and then run. And now let's go up to a cliff. And so here I'm standing in front of it, and here I'm standing behind it. And so this looks actually mostly okay. If it doesn't look okay, there's a few things that you can change. So one thing is that it is sorting it based on the Y position of my character versus the Y position of this tile. And the other thing that it's doing is it's determining how far I can walk down based on the collision shape of my player and the collision shape of the different tiles in the tile map. So if you're having issues with that, what you can do is you can go to this debug dropdown and turn on visible collision shapes. And this will show you all of the collision shapes that are applied in your game. So let me blow this up a little bit. And so here you can see my player stops because the edge of this part of my player collision shape hits the edge of this. And then here it goes there. But if I was still coming down kind of far and it wasn't working properly, what I can do is I can change the Y sort origin. So I'm trying to see if there's any places where that might be applicable based on the different shapes here. Let's try to go over this more intricate thing. Yeah, because sometimes what'll happen is if your collision shapes aren't quite set up right, or your tile set is slightly different, what can happen is you can actually, the player will start to show behind it as you move up here, and then if you move too far down this way and it doesn't collide in time, the player will start to show in front of it. So that's a matter of changing the Y sort origin of your tile map. So if you go to the tile map, you go to the tile set, and I'm going to drag this up, and if I go to paint and then go here, and I will click on Y sort origin. And so this allows me to change the point at which it's going to transition from being in front to behind. And so these points right here show that transition right here. So we're talking about mostly our cliffs here, because those are the things that are Y sorted, as well as this tree that I've placed. And so if we need to change this, like you may need to, for yours to get it to work, you may need to move the Y sort origin up a little bit. What you would do is you could put like -2 and I'll hit enter, and then I can paint that setting on. And what you see is it changes that point to be a little bit higher up on the screen. You may need to, for your tree, you may need to actually move this point down a little bit, because maybe you want it to transition a little bit farther down the tree. And again, this is based on the collision shape of your tree and the collision shape of the character to a certain extent. And so maybe I want to move this down. I could move this down like by 4, hit enter, and then click there, and it will change that. And so again, I didn't really need to do that here, so I can set all these back to 0 if I wanted to. Mine worked, but just in case you need to change yours, that is how you would do it. And then if you ever wanted to set it all back, you just change that to be 0, and you paint that setting on there, and you should be good to go. Your game should successfully be doing the Y sort for anything that is on that same Z index.